Welcome back, friends. Gabriel Kevin here. How are you today? Hope you're having a great day. And this is another installment in my music suite of tutorials covering mixing, recording, mastering, producing, even songwriting. And my whole channel, Everything Gabriel, covers a lot of other stuff like literary, like writing novels and poems and poetry. And also my Radical Cathedral kind of reality show, but we talk about life. So there's all kind of stuff on my channel, but this is another installment in my suite of music tutorials. Now these are my songs, so I use my songs for these tutorials that I've written. They're out on Spotify and Pandora and all those places, and they're also on my channel, so I always like you to hear the final mastered version of my songs when we go through some of this really in-depth stuff. And this is actually a good tutorial to do that, to see what's happening here, and then go listen to the mastered one and see how it actually sounds within the master. I could play the full thing here, but the master version actually has the final product that I would like you to hear, because that's the one that goes out, right? Okay, and there is a mastering tutorial if you want to learn more about mastering, especially in theory and Studio One. So let's get down to this tutorial. It's a quick tutorial. We're going to talk about volume. Volume, high, low. Okay, cool. A very major thing, obviously, in actual mixing, right? Because, you know, if one thing is louder than another, it's going to come out more prominent to the listener. That's fairly obvious stuff. Or if you have, you know, in a stereo spectrum, something to the left, something to the right, and you increase the left one, you know, they're going to left heavy on their hearing. But it could be that's the way you want it, and that's how you mix. So volume, very important. And look at my mixing tutorial, because we talk about volume, stereo spectrum, and frequency in ways you can use all three together, almost like in a 3D kind of concept in terms of mixing. But this is specifically volume, and it's talking about how you manage that in Studio One. And I'm sure there's other ways to do it in other DAWs, but here we go with Studio One. Okay, so I have my track list here, and I have my console down here. And if you looked at my track tutorial, you'll know that the track list and the console go hand in hand. They're the same. They're just different views and different functionality. So on this track here, which is a strings, keyboard strings, it is highlighted down here, and it's highlighted here. So if I highlight this blue guy here, this guitar, it'll highlight it down here. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so I'm going to highlight this again. Now this bar, this little bar, white bar here, is my volume control at the track level, which is the same as my volume control fader down here in the console. So if I move this console one, and you look up there, it's moving that one. If I move this one, it moves the console one. Cool. Okay. So why would it be both? Well, if you don't use the console view, because I can turn that off, I can just go up here and say, get out of here, view, turn the console off. It's not there, so the only volume you have is over here. So that's one reason. The other reason, I think, I don't put the console back, because if you know me, I'm a console freak, because I grew up in the days when none of this stuff was here and you had to use outbound equipment and you actually had faders and stuff, physical faders, and that's all you had. So if you're working up here in the track and you want to raise the volume, you know, you have to go find it down here, because, you know, why go down here when you can do it right here? Or if you're working down here with panning and you want to raise the volume, you can just do it down here. So that's, to me, another reason why it's in both places. That's beneficial. Okay, so I'm going to, down here in the console, unhighlight this just so you can see something. And if you look here, it says negative 4.6 on that track. And if I come up here and I hover over this bar, it says negative 4.6. So you get the actual dB at that point in either place. If I click on this, I can actually change that. So instead of negative 4, I'm going to say, let's do positive 5, which is kind of dramatic. I can just type it in and hit enter, and it moves the fader up that much. I'm going to undo that. And so you can actually type it in just like you can type in your pans or move them manually. Okay, that takes care of that. Now, what we want to talk about here is another way to change volume. So you can change volume at the track level, and that will change everything on this track. So if I scroll across, you'll notice that my waveform is different in a lot of these. So this one's pretty fat here, and this is kind of skinny here. And these are skinny. Look how skinny that one is. And there's this big blob here. What the heck is that? Well, I'll explain it. And et cetera, et cetera. And there's another blob there. Whoa, check this out. Okay, so one thing you can do in Studio One is you can take your whole performance, and this is one keyboard performance. Believe it or not, it's one keyboard performance. It's strings, and we're going to hear in a second. I'll make sure we don't blow our ears out, and I'll prove it to you. I'll just solo this guy, and I'll hit the play button. Okay, so that's definitely strings. It sounds more like cellos, but cellos are strings. And it was one performance. So why is this all so messy? Well, it's not messy. These are events. So when I recorded this whole thing, it created one long event, assuming I didn't mess up and have to punch in or anything. Created one long event, all at the same volume. Probably around this level here, because I like to have headroom, which is space above and below, so I can work with it. And as I was mixing the song, I felt that when I got from the verse here to the chorus here, I wanted those strings to start increasing more and more. And then when it goes back to the verse, see, it drops. Now, I could have done that through automation, and you can look at my mixing and automation tutorial. And I'll do a little bit here of that automation. But sometimes if you want to do this much change within a whole track and all the events, it's sometimes easier just to use the knife tool up here and cut the track where you want to and just change the volume of that event is what we're going to look at on how to do that. And one thing nice about Studio One is when you use the cut tool, 95% of the time, it's not going to have any click, because sometimes you use a cut tool, and because of the way the WAV file is at the point of where you cut it, it can cause a little click, a little, and that's, you don't want that, because if you add reverb to that track, you're going to have a real reverb of that click. But 95% of the time, it will not do that. So if I have right here a cut, and I put my cursor, and I play that, you can hear the change of volume, but there's no click. It increased. So it does a nice job of internally doing a little bit of a internal automatic crossfade. If for some reason when you do that, I'm going to widen this track. Some reason you make this cut here because I want to increase this a little bit more right before the chorus. So my idea here is that I'm coming in, the string's there, and the chorus gets increased, but I want kind of a little bit of a slope. And I could use automation, but then I have to keep going back to the automation. And sometimes I use the automation, sometimes I just cut it. Whatever it takes. And there was a click here, and it didn't do a great job, that 5% or whatever. Then what I can do is I can highlight this guy, and if you look at my event trim and fade and stuff like that, it gets more detailed. I can just take this fade, and I can separate it. See, it separates it? And that way, it gets rid of that little clicking noise. So that's just a little trick there. But generally, it doesn't have a click. Okay, cool. So that's why I break these up. So then when I cut them, how did I change the volume? Very, very easily. So here, if I highlight this guy, there's a little square here. And that little square allows me to change the volume envelope of this event, this one event here. So if I take it and I bring it down, it's lowering it. So now if I play it, it's lower. If I want to make it real loud, I can actually go outside of it and keep pushing up. I can keep pushing up and make it like that. I don't want to blow your ears out, but let's just put it about right there. And you're thinking like, okay, that's fine, but the listener's going to hear that. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Let's lower the mains here a little bit. I'll unfade it. I'll unsolo it, and we'll just cross over it. And let's make sure it's not going to blow our eardrums out. Let me lower this enough. Forever, our time is now. The volume of this track is not that much, but it will increase it as it goes in. So I'm kind of a nitty-gritty kind of mixer. I really get deep into it because I can hear all those nuance changes and everything. And when it's in the mix, if I raise this a lot, just be dramatic about it. And now I do the full mix. Forever, our time is now. If you can hear that, I'll be making it more. Oh, by the way, it's on the left. Forever, our time is now, and I keep on. And therefore, you can change the volume of an event and do stuff like that. And when you get to the chorus, create it more, etc. And you use the cutting tool to do that, as we described. Another trick here is that if you want to raise two events, so say this one is a lot lower, this one's where it is, and maybe it's crossing over like here between a chorus and a verse, or just within something like this blob here, which we're going to get to, you can change them both at the same time proportionally. So you just highlight both events. So I highlighted that one, I hold my shift key down, I highlight that one, and now when I change either one of them, it doesn't matter, they will change proportionately. See? So when you have a whole section and you've made little changes like this, and you want to change the overall volume of the verse, but they're all different event volume envelopes, just highlight them all, pick one, and change it. And then you can actually see here, it says negative 1.6 for this envelope. Okay, this one here says negative 6.2, which would be less, right? The negative, the higher the negative, the less volume. And if I take this and I hold it down, it has another thing next to it called difference. And difference is the amount of difference that you're doing in this action. So once I do an action and I let go and I do the action again, the difference starts at 0. So I'm going to pull this down. Now watch, the dB will go down per whatever the dB is going down by my action, but difference will tell me how much. So I'm going to do this and watch. Pull it down a little bit. The difference said I just went down negative 0.1 dB, and then it moved it down that, and et cetera. So you can either look at the dB in terms of your action, or you can look at the difference that it's actually doing. So say you want a difference of, 0.1, it'll show you the difference. I tend to just look at the dB and say, okay, I went from this dB to that dB. Now, another trick here is, and we are going to get to this blob, trust me. Another trick here is, if I put this up as close as I can to the top, and I make this normal size, and you watch this, I'm going to grab this guy here, and it says negative 6.4. Now, I'm going to pull this down ever so slightly, like very little with my mouse. It went to negative 6.9. I pull back up, it went to negative 6.4. I can't get in between that. So what if I went negative 6.6? Well, looks like I can't do it. Oh well, I'll have to go home now. Now, there's a little trick here, and this took me a while to figure this out. I don't even think it's in the manual. And I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand the concept that if you have all your tracks in this sizing, and you just want to do like a major change, it'll do it, and you don't have to drag it that far. So there's a good reason for that. But if I want to be more incremental in the volume envelope of an event, that sounds so cool, the volume envelope of an event. And now for today's lesson, what you can do is you just increase the size. And this is not changing anything, I'm just increasing the size. I'm zooming in vertically. Now if I take this, and there's a little trick, negative 6.4, and I pull it down ever so slightly, it'll go to, ever so slightly, negative 6.6. That's what I wanted. So you see when the larger, and look, negative 6.4, I go up, it's negative 6.3. So if I wanted to get to negative 6.5, I have to make this even a little bit larger, and it'll do it. So if your increments are too much, just widen it and then pull it. And it'll do them all proportionally. That's a little trick there for that. Okay. So the final thing I want to go through is, what is this thing? And this is something to do with more producing than actual mixing. So in this song, this is a verse, and there's a part, and this song is holding on to, which is about epic love. And I use a lot of historical figures in it. Helen of Troy, Paris and Helen of Troy, Lancelot and Guinevere. So in this lyric here, it talks about Paris and Helen of Troy, and over here in the second verse, it talks about Lancelot and Guinevere. So I love history and I love medieval times. I go to Renaissance fairs, and that's another thing we can talk about. So why this? And this is strings. Okay, this is kind of random. So let's just play it and solo it. And I use the event volume envelope to do this. Oh, that's kind of cool. And again, this is one performance. I just cut it up and doing stuff to it. So why is that like that? Because I wanted to accentuate the moment in time when it says Helen of Troy. Because, It's Helena Troy. Of course you got to accentuate it. It's Guinevere, out of King Arthur. On the second verse, I want to accentuate. I want to draw the listener in. They're going to hear Helena Troy, but I want them to remember Helena Troy. So what did I do? I took one track like this, which is on the left, and I didn't want to make it like, bam, guitar power chord. It doesn't fit the song. So I took this strings, cello, I think it's cello, and I have it so when it hits that moment, now let's put it in the mix, and hopefully you can hear this. Let's make sure it's loud enough. Now again, I've taken off a lot of the nectars and plugins and stuff, so you're not going to hear the reverb. You're going to hear raw vocals and stuff like that. So hopefully you can hear this, because the nectar and stuff has compression and brings down the vocal volumes and stuff like that. So it'll at least give you the point visually where this happens if you can't really hear it that well, because the effects and the processing is not all on. But if you listen to the mastered version and go out to Spotify, Pandora, or on my site and listen to Holding On To and listen to the verse when it hits Helena Troy, you will hear it. Trust me. And it's cool because it's just there. It accentuates her name. So let's see if this can be done here. Boy, forever Paris and Helen of Troy. Forever. Now, isn't that cool? Come on. Put in the comments, say, Gabriel, you are so cool. No, anyway. No, I'm not cool. That is a production thing. That is you're thinking, I want to draw the listener in at that point in time, and when I sing Helen of Troy, I want you to know Helen of Troy is cool. Boy, forever Paris and Helen of Troy. Forever. And it goes right back. This is cool. And over here, we'll do the same thing. You'll hear Lancelot and Guinevere. The boy. Together, Lancelot, Guinevere's joy. Together. Cool stuff. And how did I do it? Same thing. I just took a volume envelope and I did this. So if I did this, and let's just take the song out and just do just the track, this is the kind of effect you'll get. This is medium volume, high volume, and this is ridiculously low volume. And you can do that. So anyway, that's it. That's how you can play with volume, both at the track level and at the event level, and split it up and do kind of like, an event automation without doing actual automation. And why? Because sometimes automation is great, and you can go in here and you can go up here and you hit the automation button, which changes the view of the track in Studio One, and it has a drop down, and you can add and remove stuff. I'm not going to do that right now, but you can do all kinds of stuff, automation. And the two I already have here, but it's inactive. If I volume, I could actually have done that here. I could have put a point here, and a point there, and a point there, and a point there, and just had the automation go up like this. Okay? I could just do that here. Point here, point here, point there, point there, and pull this up like this, and pull this one up like this, and it's the same idea as doing the event volume, envelope volume, but this would all look the same, and this will just go up in volume at that point here. Why, Gabriel, didn't you do that? Because it's a minor thing to me. I just wanted to increase the volume right when it says Helena Troy. To go into all this automation, which is great to do automation, it's a little complicated. Then every time I want to, it's not right. I just want to do it a little bit more. Now I'm going to take this read off here because it shouldn't be on. And then I'm going to get out of the automation view. Okay, I'm back to here. So I did it and I listened to it, and then I listened to the master version because everything gets more compressed together, so you can lose some of your peaking volume, and that kind of got lost a little bit. So I went back to the mix, and I just didn't have to go into the automation. All I did was take this thing and I just raised it more or lowered it more or whatever. I'll do that, and it's real quick, and then I can go back and do it. So there are different purposes to use automation for volume, and there's different purposes to use event volume envelope, and it's up to you. But it's great to have all the options to benefit the way you're mixing and to, make you more efficient or make you more powerful. To me, when you use automation, it's very powerful. You can do all kinds of stuff. You can have volume coming up in a slope, right? So if you have 1 point here and 1 point there, but you have it at an angle, rather than do 4 points, just do 2 points, it'll raise the volume and you'll hear it incrementally raise. Well, you can't do that here. So you would have to use the automation to do that, if you understand what I'm saying. Real quick, visually, if I did this, say I put a point here, and I put a point here, and I just raise this one, see the slope? That volume will start increasing right there till it gets to that point, and can stay at that point till I put another point. Well, that typo, I'm going to undo that, and undo the points. That kind of process can only be done through automation. I can't have a slope here. Well, you could say, well, why don't you just do this and pull this fader in, not fader, I'm sorry, fade in, and there's a slope there. Yeah, but the problem with that is it starts at 0. So this sound is going to, if I play it, it's going to be loud, and it's going to go, still kind of dramatic, it's going to go to 0 and then slide in. See, it went to 0 and then came up. So if you want to keep it at the same volume, like here, this kind of volume, and make this slope there, but you want the beginning of that slope still to have the same volume you started with, you can't use the fade. It won't work because it starts at 0. So that's why a good reason to use automation, a good reason to use the volume envelope is when you have a quick thing to do. I think that's what I do. Okay, cool. I think that's enough on volume. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If you found it helpful and you want to find out more stuff, because I'm constantly putting out more things, both in the music and my shows and stuff like that, and literary, please subscribe. It takes 2 seconds. Just hit the subscribe button, and it helps me out, helps you out. And then if you like this, please like, and please definitely share. I believe we're a community of artists, producers, songwriters, and all of us together are more powerful. So, yes, please subscribe, please like if you liked it, and please definitely share. And my final note is, have a great, awesome day. Take care. Bye.